Humans! I'm making a cameo for my daddy. Because daddy said that he was going to do Super Deck Sunday because it's actually kind of cool enough that he could film it. But unfortunately, he didn't prepare the decks in time before we had to go for my park trip. And I didn't want to wait. And so daddy's decks are in his quiver. And so I'm just here to say hi. And that I hope you guys enjoy the Super Deck Sunday video that's coming up. And it's going to be another one of those landy decks that Daddy has. Daddy has lots of landy decks. I didn't know that Daddy had so many landy decks. I don't think Daddy knew he had so many landy decks. Anywho, I'm tired now because it was a big park trip and I'm sleepy. So you guys enjoy the Super Deck Sunday video, which you're going to see on a Monday because Daddy's not going to film it today probably. And I'm gonna take a nap now. Okay? Okay. Much love to you, humans. Enjoy your cards. I go to sleep. So my dad went out for a little bit, and so Kaiba and I are here, and we're going to try and film as much as we can of Super Deck Sunday together before he comes back. And then I will film the rest of the deck tomorrow as needed. Hopefully we can get through the majority of it. That is the goal. I was going to talk about the quiver, but I'm going to leave that for another day. For today, we have another landfall deck. I've been promising you guys this deck for a bit, and I'm excited to share it with you. So for today, I present to you my Toph Hard-Headed Mentor deck. This is my first Avatar deck. I plan to build like 4 or 5 Avatar decks easily. I have another Toph deck I want to build. I want to build an Azula deck. I'm working on an Avatar Aang deck right now. And I'm not sure what else I'm going to build, but I've got plenty of cards left in the set, so I'm sure I'll find something. But for today, the goal of this deck is to do a whole bunch of earthbending. So, Toph says, as she enters, you can discard a card. If you do, you get to return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand, which there's a decent number of those in this deck. Not a crazy amount, but there's a decent amount. The big thing, though, is whenever you cast a spell, you get to Earthbend 1, and if that spell happens to be a lesson, you get to put an extra +1/+1 counter on that land. So, basically, every card I play in this game, except for the lands themselves, will automatically start an Earthbending sequence, which is awesome. That is, as I say, the main goal of this deck. I do have some tokens for this deck. Not a lot, but a few. We've got a Sapperling token. We've got an ally, a clue, a 3/3 beast, a 3/3 badger that actually also has another Sapperling on the back, just in case I need one, and a 4/4 bear that has a food on the back, just in case I need it. So those are the tokens for this deck. And then for the lands, we've got a Terramorphic Expanse, an Evolving Wilds, a Terminal Moraine. I like this one. It's a little bit older, but it kind of does the same thing, except it costs you 2 to get the search. But it also taps for colorless, so it actually can function as a real land for you if you need it to. I have a whole bunch of forests and mountains. These are all from the Avatar set. They're actually all from the Jumpstart set, I believe, for the most part. And then I actually have a few of the full arts, too. My favorite full art being this one. It's a nice shiny version of the Lover's Cave. And then we've got the Omashu City, a Rugged Highlands, a Cinderglade, because I can actually count that for a forest when I need to later on. Notville Slumber Mound. I like this guy. He's cool. He does enter tapped, which is annoying, and he only taps for red. It would be nice if he tapped for red and green, but you can pay 3 and a red and 2 green to tap and sacrifice this thing, and you can make a 4/4 Troll Warrior token with Trample. I do not own a Troll Warrior token, and chances are I'm not going to actually do that. The main reason I have it in here is because I do like the idea that I can make a land that is supposed to create a creature into a land. So I thought that was kind of funny. And then if it gets targeted, I can always sacrifice it and make another creature. Raging Ravine, on the other hand, can actually become a land creature itself by paying 2 a red and a green. Or it can tap for red or green, whichever I prefer. Kaiba is munching around on all his treats. He has many, many treats on the bed. I have Bossing Say to make up for the mono red land. I have a mono green land too that is a legendary. And this one's in here largely because of the fact that I can pay 2 and a green to Earthbend. So this is just an extra way to get some Earthbending each turn if I need it. I have a Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop. This one is in here mostly because I want to be able to make an extra ally token potentially. So for 5, I can tap this and create an ally token, which will let me trigger another Earthbending potentially in this deck. That's the only reason why I'm actually running this, to be perfectly honest. Otherwise, I do like the fact that it comes in untapped, but yeah. This one, on the other hand, is pretty cool. Rumble Arena has Vigilance, so when I make this into a land creature, I do not have to tap to swing with it. It does tap for colorless. It also lets me scry, and then I can pay 2 and tap to add 1 mana of any color, which I'm probably not going to do that last bit. To be honest, that last bit kind of sucks, but otherwise, the rest of this card's insanely good. And then the last land I have in here is a Cascading Cataracts. Sorry. I always get tongue-tied on that one. And this one's in here largely because it is indestructible. So once I turn this into a creature, I can swing with it, and I don't have to worry about it getting killed. I also like the fact that it does tap for colorless, or I can pay 5 and put it in to get any mana that I need if I'm stuck for some reason. Chances are I'm not using that last ability. It's mainly in here for the indestructibleness. And that's our land base. Our land base is, if I remember correctly, I think there's 36 in total. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Pardon me, 37 it looks like. Really? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It is 37. Okay, that's why I had to remove the Explorer Scope, which is fine. I plan to use the Explorer Scope in a different deck anyways, but that was going to be an artifact that I was going to include in this deck just to help me get some more landfall stuff going. But it ended up being cut. There is one other land in here, but it is attached to an enchantment first, so we will get to that when we get to it. Next up, I'm going to show you all the instants and sorceries. First up, I'm going to show you all the lessons, though. So I have 3 colorless lessons. Environmental Sciences, which lets me get a basic land put into my hand, and I gain 2 life. Introduction to Prophecy, which lets me scry 2 and draw. And this one, which lets me exile a non-land permanent, and then its controller gets to draw. So it's kind of like a really expensive version of Path to Exile, except for I'm not giving life, I'm giving a card draw. Combustion Technique and How to Start a Riot are the only 2 red lessons in this deck. This one lets me get rid of a creature, and do damage to a creature, and if it dies, I get to exile it. And this one lets me give 1 creature menace, and then all my creatures +2/+0, which is kind of nice. And then I've got a whole bunch of green lessons. Balmy's Feast Lecture. That one's probably the worst one in this deck because there isn't a lot of ways to make food. There's like 1 artifact that makes food, and then this. Seismic Sense, or the artifact is actually a food, pardon me. I get to look at the top cards of my library, reveal a creature or land from among them, put into my hand, and the rest go to the bottom. X is based on the amount of lands I already have. Shared Roots is a nice one. Cycle of Renewal is good because it lets me sacrifice a land and get 2. Which you're going to see later. I kind of want the lands to die and come back repeatedly. That's why this deck is going to be fun to play. Origin of Metal Bending. Destroy an artifact or enchantment, put a +1/+1 counter on our creature, and it gets indestructible. Probably doing that second one. True Ancestry is a good way to get something back from my graveyard, plus it gives me the clue token. It's the only way I can make a clue token in the entire deck. Oh my goodness, your Marrowbone. Yeah? Yeah? Oh my goodness. We have the Cracked Earth technique, which lets me Earthbend 3 twice and then gain 3 life. Earthbending Lesson, which gets me Earthbending 4. And Rock Avalanche, which lets me Earthbend X, which is equal to the number of force I currently control, which, again, a good reason why I wanted Cinderblade in there. Warlord's Fury is the first of sorceries and instants that aren't a lesson. I have like 5 that are not lessons, so a total of 20 instants and sorceries, I believe, if I remember correctly. This one lets me give all my creatures first strike, and then I draw a card. I think that's going to be fun for when all my lands attack. Same with this. It's going to give all my lands Vigilance and Trample, because they're all going to have +1/+1 counters on them. In addition to some of my other creatures, hopefully, as well. This one I get to play twice, which is nice. This one lets me draw a card in addition to it, though, which is cool, too. Harrow is just another cycle of renewal. Walk with the Ancestors, lets me just get another creature back, or permanent back from my graveyard to my hand, and then I can discover 4, which is kind of cool. And finally, Attempt with Discovery is just a fantastic way to get a whole bunch of extra lands on the field quickly, because most people are going to probably cave and at least give me a land in the early going. Although, some people will be responsible. Some. Next up, let's do the enchantments and artifacts. So, here's that food I was mentioning. It is Heaped Harvest. It is the only, there's only 2 artifacts in this deck. And this is the only other food. So, when it enters and when it gets sacrificed, I get to search my library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, which is beautiful for a landfall deck. And then it does the usual food thing. Crystalline Armor is going to give me an insane boost to any one creature, because that creature will get +1/+1 for each land I control plus trample, and all my lands are going to basically be eternal once they get Earthbent. Sorry. This one is fun. Azusa's Many Journeys. So Azusa's Journeys lets me play an additional land, then I can gain 3 life, and then transforms. And it becomes this beautiful little enchantment creature, which is a 3/3 that has the ability of, whenever it becomes blocked, I get to untap 3 lands I control. So if somebody doesn't let this through, and I'm going to eventually be able to give this a lot of buff and trample, but if somebody doesn't let this through, then I automatically get to untap 3 of my land creatures, which is nice. Then I have an extra few blockers. Going back to the pile, we have Earthbender's Ascension, which is a beautiful little card here. I like the landfall in particular. Whenever a land enters, I put a quest counter on this thing. When it has 4 or more quest counters on it, I can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, and that creature gets trample until end of turn for every landfall. So it's pretty solid. It also lets me Earthbend 2 when it comes in. This one's going to let me put a extra +1/+1 counter on anything that I tap. So all my land creatures are going to get an extra +1/+1 counter each turn, and anything else that I might want to swing with. I don't really have any mana dorks in the deck as far as I recall. This one is nice because it's going to give me a +1/+1 counter on something each turn, and then once I get something with a toughness of 6 that I've added a +1/+1 counter to, this little guy transforms, and he gives all my creatures vigilance. So all my lands will be able to swing on my turn, and then I can use them for mana on main phase 2, which is the main goal of this deck. To not play things in the beginning, go to a battle, and then play a bunch of stuff afterwards. Solid Ground is nice because it lets me Earthbend 3 when it comes in, and then if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a permanent I control, they get an additional counter, so that's going to boost both of those enchantments really nicely. Growing Rights of Itlamok is the one I was talking about before, where it's going to transform into a land. First, it lets me look at the top 4 cards of the library and get a creature. But the big thing is, if I have 4 or more creatures, it transforms into this, which is insane. Taps to add green, or it can tap to add green for each creature I control. Which, there's going to be a bunch of creatures if I have a whole bunch of lands that are creatures, so yeah. This is the other artifact that's in here, which is probably the best artifact that I could have added to this kind of deck. So everybody's going to get to play an additional land, which everybody will like that. And at the beginning of each player's upkeep, they can draw 3 cards if they have nothing in their hand, which is also nice. And then finally, Primeval Bounty is just an insanely good card in this deck. If I cast a creature, I get a beast. If I cast a non-creature, I get to put +1/+1 counters on a creature. And whenever I play a land, I get to gain 3 life. Keep in mind the land gaining 3 life thing, because this is going to become crazy in a bit. I'm going to show you the avatar creatures last, because I want to show you the sick combo first. Actually, no, we're going to do the avatar creatures first, because this is an avatar deck. So, we're going to go through them fairly quickly, though, because you've seen all these before when I did my openings, if you've seen those videos. And because there's nothing crazy in this pile, except for at the very end. So, adds green or adds 2 green if you've got a creature with power 4 or greater. I don't like Exhaust because you can only do it once, but I do get to Earthbend 2 and put +1/+1 counters on this thing if I pay the 6, so... It's mainly in here, though, because it's an ally. This one I like, though, because it has reach and it gets trample as well if I have a land creature, so that's pretty cool. This one is in here largely because it reduces the cost of all my lessons by 1, and because Iroh is like one of Toph's favorite characters, and I like Iroh and Toph. They're my favorite too, so I thought I wanted an Iroh in this deck. Haru's in here because he's insanely good with the ally thing, so this is one I was talking about before, wherever an ally comes into play, I get to Earthbend 1. That's why I wanted the Lotus land in the deck, because it'll let me actually Earthbend repeatedly every time I pay the 5 for that. There's not a crazy amount of allies, but there's an okay amount. Whenever this guy attacks, he gets Earthbend X, where X is the number of creatures I control with power 4 or greater, so it's going to be at least Earthbend 1, because he's power 4 or greater himself. So that is pretty good. Toph Earthbends 2 when she comes into play, and her power is equal to the number of lands that have +1/+1 counters on them. Or no, the number of +1/+1 counters on lands, pardon me. And then we got the Earth Kingdom General. He Earthbends 2 when he enters, and he gives me life. Wall Top Sentries. Pretty solid there. Bumi is insanely good if I have enough lessons in my graveyard, because he can Earthbend a massive amount of my lands all at once. Or he can just become really big. Flopsy gets a +1/+1 counter on all my creatures when he comes into play, and any creature with power 4 or greater can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, so there's essentially Menace if he's on board. The Earth King is cool because he gives me a bear, but the main thing is, whenever a creature with power 4 or greater attacks, I get to search my library for a land, and put it onto the battlefield tapped. It's a basic land, but still, that's an insane amount of lands that are going to be coming into play if I have enough creatures. Badger Mole is going to give all my creatures trample as long as they have a +1/+1 counter on them. And then Bumi is the best guy in this deck by far because he has trample already, he's 5/4, and then the big thing is, whenever he deals damage to a player, I get to untap all my lands and have an extra combat phase where I get to swing with my lands again. Granted, if my lands have vigilance, I don't have to worry about untapping them, but this is still pretty cool. And my deck is home, so I'm going to finish the deck tomorrow morning. We're going to finish it now. It's good. We're just going to go real quietly, so we're not getting too disturbing. Let's finish this deck off. Alright, so we got the Elvish Rejuvenator. This comes into play, I get another permanent back from my graveyard. This is really good because I need to get some of those enchantments back repeatedly since they're going to get destroyed. This I've debated taking out of the deck, but I like it because of the life gain. And it does let me play lands from the top of my deck. I don't like the fact that it shows everything, but I don't really have anything in here that I don't want to show anymore. There was originally a meld card that I was going to add to this deck, but I realized that it was going to be too hard to pull off the meld because of the way Earthbending works, so yeah. This one also gives me a life whenever a land enters the battlefield, so essentially between these two and that enchantment I showed you earlier, I'm getting 5 life for every land that comes into play if all 3 are on board. And then, between the next 3 that I'm going to show you, because I put them out of order by accident, I get to deal 3 damage if all 3 of these are on board for every land that comes into play. These two just have this straightforward landfall damage, 1 to each opponent. This one's a neat one, though, because this one does the damage, but if it's the second time, I also get to draw a card. So that's pretty cool. This one has first strike and just gets buffed for every land that comes into play, so it's cool because it can hit something that has Death Touch and clear it for me, if need be, or whatever. This one has haste, and again gets just really buffed. The other thing is this one can't be really blocked successfully by tokens unless they're, like, buffed up. So you gotta block it with something cool. Territorial Scythe Cat. It gets +1/+1 counters and trample. Spore Mound is the reason why I have the Saproling tokens in here, because every land that comes in is going to give me a Saproling. When I go to combat, if Loyal Guardian's on board with my Toph, then I get to give everything I own a +1/+1 counter, which is insanely good. And then, as you saw earlier, I have creatures that allow trample for if I have +1/+1 counters. This one also does that, though. 3/3 with reach gives all my modified creatures trample, and whenever a modified creature deals combat damage to a player, I get to get a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. So that's another one that's just going to be generating a whole bunch of extra lands onto the battlefield. I love my Tortoise, because my Tortoise is going to give all my land creatures a +1/+1 bonus, and it also reduced the cost of my Lotus Field one and my Earthbending one by mana, so that they're cheaper to do the abilities, which is nice. The milling thing is okay. It does let me bring lands back, which is nice, at least. But, yeah. This is insanely good, because then I don't have to actually swing with my actual creatures. I can just swing with all my lands and keep my creatures up for blockers, which is fun. Because my creatures can be in my mana. And then, whenever this thing dies, if it was a creature, it comes back to the battlefield as an enchantment, so it's just a nice little bonus, that. Next up, this one has a beautiful little landfall ability, and that's the main reason it's in here. Although it is going to get a big power bonus based and toughness bonus based on how many lands I control, but the big thing is, whenever a land enters the battlefield under my control, this thing makes me a badger. So before I showed you the enchantment that's giving me a beast, and now I get badgers. And saprolings. Next up, I threw in Lumira, Bellow of the Wogs. I love this guy. Vigilance and Reach. He is equal to power and toughness, based on number of lands, just like the last one. And this one lets me mill 4 cards when it comes into play, and then return all my lands from my graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So if for some reason my lands weren't Earthbent already, any land that went to the graveyard I can rescue with this, which is pretty good. And next up we have Nissa, who shakes the world, because why not? All my creatures that are forests are going to tap for an extra mana. This is going to be very important in the near future. I can put 3 +1/+1 counters on a non-creature land I control and make it into an elemental, which is pretty cool. So it's like a pre-Earthbend mode. But the big thing is, if I can get to her to 8 and I can -8 her, then all my lands become indestructible. So instead of it just being the one land I control, it'll be every land that is indestructible. So if I do that, and then I have Bumi on board, that's 2 times I can swing with a massive board of indestructible lands at people. And finally, this combo is my favorite part of this deck. First off, I have Yadora, Gravegardener. So whenever my non-token creatures go to the graveyard, they are going to return to the battlefield face down as force, which, as we saw with her, means they will tap for double the mana. And then when they're force, I can actually then Earthbend them. And if I Earthbend them, I can Where did she go? Oh well. If I Earthbend those forests, then I can turn them into creatures again, and when they die, they return face up as their original form, which is insanely good. But the real thing I like about this is I like to combine it with this. So Hurler Cyclops says pay 1, sacrifice another creature, which I'm going to just keep tapping my land creatures and sacrificing them. Deal 1 damage to any target, which is going to be whoever I'm facing. Those lands will come back into play because of the Earthbending ability. And then, if I have enough things on board, I will deal a whole bunch of extra damage to all my opponents, plus gain a whole bunch of life through this combo. And what I really love about this is if I do it right, I can take all the creatures that I've turned face down with Eudora and sacrifice them with the Hurler to bring them all back to my board as the original thing that they were. And that is the insanely fun combo that I worked into this deck that I think makes this deck probably very unique, hopefully. Anywho, that's all I got for you today. So, Kaiba has left the room to go downstairs. I think my dad came home. Yes, I think my dad definitely came home. So, without further ado, much love to you all from Kaiba the Puck and myself to you. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.